I will call to order the November 25th meeting of the Verona Common Council, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the roll call. Ms. Schofield, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Here.
Alderperson Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Doyle.
Here.
Alderperson Manley.
Here.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie.
Here.
Alderperson Steiner.
Here.
And Alderperson Yurs.
Here. We have everyone here this evening, so we have a quorum, and thank you for everyone being here. Next on the agenda, we have public comment, and I would ask if you have public comment that is not related to the budget, that you would come forward at this time. We do have a little farther down the agenda under the Finance Committee, we have public hearing on the budget. So if you have anything else that you wish to speak about that is not related to the budget, you could speak now. There is a sign-up sheet at the podium if you would sign up if you wish to speak, and state your name and address for not only our benefit but for the benefit of those watching at home. So is there anyone else that wishes to speak under public comment that is not related to the budget? Anything under public comment not budget related? Third and final time, anything non-budget related for public comment? Not seeing any, we will move on. Next, we have approval of minutes from the November 11th meeting of the Common Council. Those minutes have been included with your packet. What is your pleasure?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley, seconded by Mr. McGilvery. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried and the minutes are approved. Under Mayor's business, I really don't have much this evening since we've been meeting like every week, so which is fine. But I do want to, Ron Reeder's in the audience again here this evening, and Ron, thank you for just a great job that you and your staff do for snow removal. I know that we say this throughout the year. We got caught a little bit by surprise today. I was telling Ron earlier, I woke up at 4:30 and I let the dog out, and about 20 after 5 I saw that it was snowing hard. So, but a great job that you do, and it's something that as a city we're very proud of. We get complimented on our snow removal more than anything else that we do as far as a city service, so thank you. With that, that will conclude my report for this evening. Mr. Burns, if you would do the administrator's report, please.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple updates this evening. First, a couple meetings that are coming up next week. We have the final steering committee for the downtown transportation and corridor planning process. That's going to be held at 4 p.m. here at City Hall. And then following the steering committee meeting, that draft plan will be going to the Plan Commission, where there'll be a public hearing, and then to the City Council, and those meetings would be after the first of the year. On Tuesday, December 3rd, there'll be a meeting of the Fire Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee looking at the fire and EMS facility design. We will have an updated draft concept plan, and we're hoping to have preliminary elevations and some cost information. That meeting will take place at 5:30 p.m. again here at City Hall. Last week there was a meeting of the Dane County Cities and Villages Association. Mayor Hochmer and I attended on behalf of the City of Verona. There was an update on activity in the legislative process throughout this session and a couple of bills that are still pending. There is information included in the weekly Dane County Cities and Villages update that was sent out earlier today. If anyone has any questions, please contact me. The other thing I wanted to report on is that Dane County Cities and Villages Association is still looking for an appointee from that organization to represent cities and villages on the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. There was nobody that followed through on the initial call for candidates, so they are still looking for nominations. And again, if anyone is interested, you can contact me for more information. And then finally, for the month of December, as we discussed at the last meeting, we normally hold one council meeting in the month of December, and the consensus at the last meeting was to hold that on December 9th. I have heard that there are a couple people that would not be able to be in attendance at that meeting due to conflicts that have come up since our last meeting. So we did want to just ask and see if everyone else is available to make sure we would have a quorum on the 9th.
For those that are unable to make it on the 9th, please raise their hands. So we have 2. And if we're certain if everyone else can make it, then we will still move forward with the 9th. Okay. Anything
That
else,
concludes
Bill?
my report.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burns? Seeing none, since Mr. Gunlock is not here this evening, Bill is also going to do the engineer's report. Bill?
Yeah, thank you. Information from the city engineer for various projects. Liberty Business Park, landscaping has been completed and the project is now shut down for winter. Asphalt surface course paving will occur in the spring of 2014. For the Locust Drive project, the asphalt binder course has been in place and asphalt pavement patches have been placed at the intersection of Whispering Pines. Curb ramps were placed on Thursday and Friday of last week. There's some street terrace work that needs to be done in the next couple weeks if weather permits. Hopefully we'll get a break here. Otherwise the work will be completed in the spring. For Locust addition to Cathedral Point, the gas, electric, telephone, and cable TV utilities are being installed. Again, weather permitting, street terraces will be landscaped. If not completed in the next couple weeks, that also would be completed in the spring. For Scenic Ridge Phase 5, work on the lift station continues. Interior piping will be installed over the first 2 weeks of December, with the control panel due for arrival the second week of December. The lift station should be operational by the end of December. And finally, for Northern Lights, the tie-in at the north end was completed last week. Additional concrete work and restoration remains. All of the work is scheduled to be completed by the first week of December.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill? Seeing none, we will move on. Next, we move to the Finance Committee. Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9A1, I'll make a motion to approve payment of the monthly bills in the amount of $657,533.72.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Doyle. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the way of explanation, 3 of the larger items from this month's bills, first being to A1 Excavating, Inc. for a pay estimate 3 in the amount of $269,356.10. That is for Liberty Business Park construction, which is a TIF 7 expense. TIF 6 expense. Item 2 would be to Metro System for Metro Transit System, third quarter investment partner share, $67,000. That is a pass-through. As you know, Epic funds that. We pay the bill, and then Epic picks up that after the bill is paid. And thirdly, being to the Verona Area School District for a TIF 5 refund. We did close the TIF 5. We had an audit this evening that we reviewed and accepted. That payment to the Verona Area School District is $111,133 even.
Thank you. Are there questions for the committee or for staff on the payment of bills? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve the bills in amount totaling $657,533.72. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried.
Thank you. Under item 9A, under item 9A2, I'll make a motion to open a public hearing on the 2014 city budget.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Manley. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The motion carries. We are now in public hearing. Before we have anyone from the audience speak, I would just ask if Mr. Burns, if you could just give a brief update of where we are right now in the budget process.
Yes, at this point in the budget process, there has been a recommended budget that was presented and discussed by the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee did vote to recommend that recommended budget to the City Council, and then the Council has met as a committee of the whole to review a presentation and information on the budget in the city's current financial condition, as well as to discuss potential amendments to the budget, and those items were discussed and debated at the working session last week. So just to recap for those that weren't at the meeting or didn't see the presentation, the budget as recommended includes a property tax levy of $8,504,849. That's an increase in the levy, which is the amount collected through property taxes, of 4.3%. We are calculating that the city's equalized tax rate, and that's a rate that's based on equalized value, and it's intended to take into account differences from one year to the next with changes in property valuation, that rate would be $6.73 per thousand, which is an increase of 3.0%. We're anticipating and calculating that the assessed mill rate based on the recommended budget would be $6.77 per thousand. That's an increase of 4.9%. However, because this was a revaluation year, most properties did see a decrease in value. So therefore, with a decrease in value, the assessed rate would be an increase. And based on information provided by the city assessor, for the average home, which according to the assessor is valued at $272,000 this year, they would have an estimated city tax of $1,842.56. That's an increase of $17.42, or about 1% over the prior year. And that, it's important to note, is just the city portion of the taxes. That does not include the portion of the tax bill that would be for the other jurisdictions, county, school district, MATC, and a piece for the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. With that, we are now in the public hearing stage. If there's anyone that wishes to speak this evening related to the budget, you could come before the podium right now, please. Is there anyone that wishes to speak this evening? And again, if you would, you can come right up, and if you would, state your name and address if you have not signed the...
I've signed it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Rick Rushline. I live at 501 South Main Street. Lived here for about 35 years. I'm here because my taxes are about 9.5 times what they were when I bought the house. Now, I've been here a while. I've been here for 35 years, since 1978. But the house is valued at about 4 times what I paid at that time, and the taxes are 9.5 times. You know, I feel that one of the reasons I moved to the city of Verona was for the lower taxes. And I've been complaining quite a bit. I've not been here, but I would like you folks to know that I feel they're way too high. It's pretty tough. We've got some Cadillac systems in place here in Verona that people probably should be looking for donations as opposed to forcibly taxing people to support very high lifestyles, like the library. I understand it's an excellent library, but if we want to go for more money, I think people need to fundraise for it. That's what we did when I started here. I was in the JCs, and we had very little here. We actually built one of the first concession stands down at the baseball park. And we did that by fundraising, not by taxing people. And one of the things that I think is really tough is when we look at people who today do not have the ability to keep up with all these taxes and are going to be forced to sell their homes. 4.8% doesn't sound like much to a lot of people that are making big money, but if you're on a fixed income, particularly Social Security, what was the increase this year? I think it was somewhere south of 2%. And you're asking for 4.8%, and I know all the other taxing jurisdictions are also looking for a lot more. I think we just need to be a little more austere and start pulling back. And I hope when the TIF districts start coming in, that we take that money and actually apply it like we were told was going to happen. That's very important to me, rather than thinking that this is a pot of gold that we can just spend. I think you've got the idea of where I'm coming from now, and I appreciate you all listening to me.
Thank you for coming this evening. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on the budget?
Hi, good evening. I'm Michael Gett. I live at 673 Harvest Lane, and just wanted to appear before you tonight to tell you that since moving to Verona, December of 2000, I've been very impressed with the quality of the city staff and services and by the thoughtful leadership consistently exhibited by this body, the Verona City Council, to manage growth, provide services, and provide services to meet the needs of that growth and to do so in a fiscally responsible manner. I've been proud to extol the virtues of Verona and this council, which I was once a part of, to anyone who will listen, putting this body up as an example of what municipal government should or could be in other cities, villages, and towns. Not anymore. Since April, I've seen this body devolve beyond the normal, healthy discourse of liberal and conservative differences into an almost radical left-wing Tea Party-like response to the actual right-wing Tea Party politics seen at the state and national levels. Surprise me. Prove me wrong in my perceptions. Pass a responsible budget, the recommended budget, in the best traditions of budgets and councils past, contrary to Mr. Diaz's and maybe others on this body, and his very public thoughts about those of us who have come before him to serve this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak this evening?
Well, much as I hate speaking in public, I guess I'm on the other side of the fence. I wanted to speak in support of, and it sounds like I'm a little too late, it's all been decided, but I wanted to speak in support of Brian Simon's request for library funding, just because, you know, it seems to me that we do have a gem of a library, and I pretty much said this in a letter to those of you on the council, but, you know, it serves all the Verona residents from preschoolers up through high schoolers through seniors, and I don't work outside the home anymore, so I see them all there every day, throughout the day, and I think there are a number of programs that serve the underserved as well as the well-served in Verona. And I think this body is doing a fine job, by the way. You know, and if the State Journal article was to be believed, to have funded the library at the level Mr. Simons requested would raise taxes on an average Verona home $100. And math is not my best subject, but I figured out that's $2 a week. And I think most of us, if we look at our budgets, we probably spend $2 a week at McDonald's and don't think a lot about it. It's $8 a month, and you know, my husband and I probably go to a movie every couple of months over at Star Cinema, and we enjoy it, but we sure use the library more than once every 2 months, and we get a heck of a lot more out of it. So I think it's, you know, I think nobody likes to pay taxes, but we sure appreciate everything we have in Verona, from the library to the snow removal to just everything. You know, it's a clean city, and I know it's a great school district, and you meet people all the time who move to Verona because of all the great services. So I hate it when then they turn around and complain about the taxes, because it's why they moved here, is for the services. So, I mean, we expect to pay for them anyway. So.
If you would, please, for the benefit of those that don't know you.
Oh,
would you
I'm
just-
sorry,
That's
yeah,
all right.
I'm on the list.
All right.
My name's Denise Beckfield, and I live at 547 Basswood Avenue. And I have lived in Verona for more than 30 years and haven't had a reason to move out yet. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
My name is Arthur Cresson. I live at 317 Thompson Street. It's been quite a few years since I sat in one of those seats, and I've made a conscious decision not to express my feelings at this body every time I saw something I agreed with or disagreed with. But right now I have to take a little exception with my friend Denise, in that I do believe our library is funded very nicely, thank you. And it serves a lot more than just Verona people. So she listed all the nice people that live in Verona and use the library. That's fine. However, I'm here basically to support the budget as it came out of committee. Any amendments to that budget that increase spending, I simply cannot agree with. I ask one thing of the council people: when these amendments are put up for a vote, I would like to see them voted on as a roll call, because as someone that helps elect you, someone that voted for some of you, I have a right to know what you are voting for. Once again, I would like to support the budget as it came out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kristen Napier, 933 Hillside Way here in the city of Verona. And the last time I took time away from my kids in the evening to come here and speak to the council, it was actually in favor of the Brown Farm development. And I guess tonight I'm a little embarrassed, not because I think that the Brown development is the wrong thing for Verona, but rather because maybe my point was misunderstood. Supporting a development like that isn't about asking to pay more taxes. It isn't about getting, an area with some larger homes and that all residents want to pay more taxes and own a larger home and do that. It's really about getting some diversity in the housing stock in Verona, getting residents who may be very attracted to the lovely library but are also finding that Middleton has a nice library and other communities that do have that type of housing have a nice library. So I just wanted to appeal to the council tonight that at some point increasing the services that are provided without increasing the share of residents to pay those taxes and the types of developments where they bring in those types of residents just isn't sustainable. And I know that at this point I'm paying attention. I know my kids' friends' parents are paying attention and are really looking carefully at their budgets, and I just wanted to make sure that folks knew. I think I would also, as a parent of young children, be willing to either donate to the library, participate in fundraising, or even a library on a volunteer basis. If Sunday, just like my kids' hockey down the street at Eagles Nest, I gotta work in the concession stand, and if I'm not there that day, sorry, but the kids aren't getting their M&Ms. I'd be fine if the library was also on a volunteer basis and folks signed up. And if the library was open on Sunday afternoon when I went to take my kids, great. And if it wasn't, we'd have to choose something else that afternoon. So just wanted to make my opinions known and those of some of my peers in the community.
Thank you for being here this evening. Anyone else that wishes to speak?
Good evening. Nancy Bartlett, 915 Tamarack Way. My remarks are going to be brief tonight. I have a couple of points first. I was on that council when we first decided to build a new library. And there was a lot of excitement, there was a lot of things going on. I was on the finance committee, and I remember the director of the library at that time said, "Yippee, now I'm going to work. We have money to raise." And she did. The Friends of the Library and that director worked really hard to raise money to help build that library. The second point is that I really would like to see you fund a public works full-time person for the full year. They haven't asked for anybody since 2006. It is a phenomenal department. The Public Works Department keeps us safe, keeps our roads running well. And they are probably one of the hardest working departments within our city. The next few comments I have are to the alders, and particularly to the new alders who have never gone through a budget process before. You represent your districts, but you also represent every citizen in the city of Verona. Now, we know that the Dane County Board is going to be raising taxes on the citizens. So with your vote tonight, please remember that your vote has consequences to every taxpayer in the city of Verona. Thank you.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Mike Willett, 7715 Midtown Road, Town of Verona, business owner in the city of Verona. First, if I could just ask a quick question that I think that I know the answer to. The meeting last week, this was not taped, is that correct?
That's correct.
I was really disappointed in that, especially there are a row of new aldermen who spoke very nicely and very right about open communication and being able to see the process. And last week you had a wonderful meeting with discussion about cutting some budgets, and there were hardly any citizens here, and this isn't available on your site. There were some comments at that meeting that just so needed to be shared, and they aren't. So I know that these things happen, and you may not have thought of that. It would be really wonderful if you look toward next year and you had a great budget meeting. Put that where everybody can see it. Hopefully people do see it. A couple things that I want to bring up, and I normally wouldn't single people out, but we can't look at that, so I'm going to do that. Alder Manley had some nice amendments for actually lowering percents. Most of these people probably don't know that. I respected that. Alder Reiki, you made a comment that I really would like an answer to, because I think that you probably didn't mean it. And although you said it, the more I thought about it, I certainly didn't want to quote it without you having a chance again to say whether you meant that. The comment that you made, and I wrote it down the minute you said it, is that you represent the people who voted for you. I hope, sincerely hope, that you represent the whole city. And I mean not the citizens, as Nancy said, but the taxpayers of the city. Not just the people that voted for you. And I think that's what you meant, but I'd love to hear that. Alder Bear, I saved you for last. I came as a taxpayer, and yes, I know that many of you have me labeled, and I try to not speak too much that way, and you already know that. I came as a business person. I came with 29 years experience of business in this city. And you waited until after I sat down, and then you insulted me for everything you were worth. To tell me that my comments don't mean anything, that my comments don't represent the business, is crap. That's not what people come to speak to. I was really disappointed in you in that. And I would have loved to have had that where everyone could have heard it, and it's gone. No, you can't speak until I'm done. Thank you. Beat you to it, John. You all do have a mission tonight, and there's been a lot of really good discussion, really good points brought up, things that have been talked about. And you've had a process explained, and a lot of you are new to the process. There's one thing that the mayor hasn't said that's out there, and y'all should know it. He probably won't like me saying it. If you don't like the end result after you talk about all these amendments, vote no. If you vote no to this budget, you start the process over. Yes, the mayor won't like me for saying that. If 3% is too much, you heard people say that 3% is too much. If you sincerely believe that 3% is too much, you have the final vote. You do get to vote that we keep seniors. We don't chase seniors out of this community because they can't afford the taxes. That we don't tell businesses that their taxes are going up and up. That we don't raise the percentage 9% while the house value goes up 4%. You do have that. You did get voted in. You have the power to do it. Do the right thing tonight. Thank you, and I appreciate you all listening to me.
Thank you. Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to respond and clarify what my comments were, and I apologize if you were insulted. That obviously wasn't my intent. What you had said was that businesses don't look at libraries as an asset to them, and I respectfully disagreed. And if I had mischaracterized your comments, I'd certainly like to know. And I should have, as I said at that time, responded when you made your comments during the public comment. So I apologize for not doing that. But I would certainly appreciate having the opportunity to have that discussion, and I think that would be helpful for both of us.
I appreciate your comments now when it's the appropriate time that I can comment back. But
Sure.
yes, I do have a lot of business experience, and I did take it as an insult that I didn't know anything.
Right. Again, I apologize, and I respect you for that. I respect all business owners. I understand you have a difficult job to do, and the economy's been difficult. So I thank you for your comments and for for giving me the opportunity to respond.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Diaz?
I just had a quick comment about the taping. Is there a city policy that perhaps staff could refer to? Because I would like to know too, and I think everything should have been taped too, but that's not my decision.
It's been past practice, not that it cannot be changed, but it's been past practice of the city that we do not record committee of the whole meetings. And we were going with past practice. Certainly we can change that.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
Just to add, I know that this came up for finance meetings as well. Just thought it might bring a little bit more clarity to the process and how it works through the committee. I know Alder Diaz has brought up that he would have liked to seen those recorded as well, so I'd just like that noted at this time as well.
Okay. The other thing that Mr. Burns just reminded me is that in the proposed budget, there are additional funds for Andy's service to the city. So that is something that we're looking at as well. Ms. Reekie?
I guess I should respond to your comment toward me. I think what I meant by that is I don't know who voted for me and who didn't. I just know that the people who I spoke with in their doorways during the campaign, those who were supportive of me let me know that, and I told them my views, and so everybody who voted for or against me knew my views and what I believed about things in general and some specifically. And so I guess when I am seeing 50-50 with wanting the library funded, not wanting the library funded, things like that, and I'm hearing that from the general public outside of my district and within my district, I think that I am expected to make my own decision because it's like half and half. And it's hard to just take all of that information and not have my own thoughts about it as well. And I know that I told the people in my district, at least, what my thoughts were on different issues. And so for the people who voted for me, I need to follow through on that. And for the people who voted against me too, that's the case. So I guess that's where that comment came from. I hope that's a good explanation.
Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak related to the budget? Anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? It's going the third and final time. Anyone else that wishes to speak on the budget this evening? Seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Yurs. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9A3, I will make a motion to approve Resolution R-13-052, approving the 2014 city budget.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Manley. Mr. McGilvray?
I don't have any comments to add at this time. I am supportive of the budget that came out of finance. I understand there were some amendments that people thought they needed to make, but I also respect the years of service and knowledge that our staff has in helping us come to these conclusions. It was not an easy budget for sure, and I recognize that there are people within the community who may feel that funding more library positions is appropriate. And to me, that's what this comes down to at this point. A lot of things in the budget, it's a little bit of a shell game that you're doing, but basically what you're promoting is the idea that we need to move towards the Sunday library service. And I recognize that the argument will be made tonight that what you're trying to do is maintain a level of service. My counter argument would be that, as Mr. Crescent said, we have made some pretty significant contributions to the library. $9.4 million in debt and debt service. $623,000 a year in operational costs. That is not a small amount. Also keep in mind that your portion of your Dane County taxes go towards supporting that operational budget, which, if I'm not wrong, we are at $1.1 million though for operational costs for the library, thereabouts. Is that correct, Mr. Simmons?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I incorrect about the Dane County?
Correct.
Okay. I'm correct on one, incorrect on the other. At any rate, that's still not an insignificant amount that we do spend for the library. And I really appreciate the library. I'm very proud of what people who promoted the library and supported the library early on and got that library built. I'm also very proud of the operational costs that we've spent over the last 7 years in making that library what it is. What I can't be in support of is going in a direction that I don't feel, I have not heard 50-50, as Ms. Reiki would say. What I have heard is 95-5, other than very specific people who are very closely affiliated with the library. All my constituents, when I take the time to explain to them the $100 more that Ms. Ms. Beckfield mentioned, when I take the time to explain to them what they currently pay, which is about $100 in debt and debt service and an additional $140 in operational cost, when I explain to them we're talking about moving towards Sundays and being open on Sundays, and that's an additional $100 that they're paying specifically for that operational cost, 95% of the people say, well, I don't think we need that right now. And I would agree. There are lots of other services within the city of Verona I think we need to be looking at that we have not in the past. And keep in mind, we have been supporting the library at about 50% of all the staffing that we've added to the library over the last 4 years has been for the library. If you take into account the RFID expense that we took on, and if you take into account the full-time positions that we've added over the last 4 years, it's about 50% for the library. And that is not insignificant. What I am asking that we do as a body is recognize that we have other departments and other needs that we need to address. Specifically, I think there are seniors that we need to address. That department needs to be addressed. Public Works, we're going to talk about that tonight. I'm hopeful that we will address that need that Mr. Reeder has adamantly said that he needs. And not that we have neglected it, but the budgets have not been easy in the past, and that's one of the things that's been left on the chopping block. I would also like to say that Parks and Rec, one of those things are what makes the city a great place to live too. The argument that this budget is excluding the library is an argument that I would refuse, because we have been meeting the needs of the library as best we can. And while I approve and appreciate what they've attained, we have to keep in mind that an A+ rating is great, Library of the Year is great, but you can't always have the best. Sometimes you have to scale back a little bit, and that's what I'm asking the library to do, and that's what I would hope that you would do, is to scale back. I'm not asking you to have a subpar library. You're going to have an outstanding library. What I'm asking you to recognize is there are other departments that need our support too. If we do this, if we decide to pursue down the road of a Sunday service or Sunday open, recognize that you're not going to be able to do what you need to do for the fire department. We're talking about going to 24/7. We have added, in the last budget cycles, we've added between 1 and 2 positions per year, because that's what we could do without raising people's taxes beyond what they can handle. We recognize that we need to go to 24/7. We need to add about 2 staff per year in order to get to 24/7 and adequate coverage with the fire. There's your 2. If you're going to add 2 here and 2 there, you're not going to be able to meet the police needs. You're not going to be able to meet the senior needs. You're not going to be able to meet Parks and Rec without significantly raising people's taxes. And I didn't hear anybody out here, with the exception of Ms. Beckfield, who said that they're okay with having their taxes go up. And I haven't heard anybody, and I've been telling people exactly this, I haven't heard anybody telling me that they want to see their taxes go up. They're okay with the way we've done this in the past, which is small increases they can handle, small increases. But we do get to the point where we're at right now, where we have a gentleman who's coming to us and saying 9.5%. That's how much my taxes have gone up, and my value's only gone up 4. Well, I think we've reached critical mass, and we have to be able to step back from what we're doing. And I would hope tonight, I don't expect this outcome, but I would hope tonight that you would step back from this library, adding 2 positions for the library, or even 1. Step back from that and focus on what we know we need to do. The last 4 budget cycles, I repeat, the last 4 budget cycles have made increases to the library, and we have not made increases to our senior staffing or the amount of money that they're being paid to do a very good job. Please keep this in mind as we go forward tonight. Thank you.
Other comments? Excuse me, Mr. Diaz?
I just have a couple process questions. One, I'd like to request that all votes on amendments are roll call votes. That's a great idea. I was going to suggest it anyways, but instead of asking for each vote, I'd just like to request it from this. Thank you. And then the other one is, are we just going to go down the list of amendments, or are we going to do it kind of informally where people can bring it up or not?
Well, we have the scenarios that Mr. Burns and Cindy worked on. We have those. The motion that's before us right now is the motion to approve the recommended budget that came out of the Finance Committee with a 3% increase on the equalized mill rate. So it's up to the council. That's one of the things about working on the budget. This is the framework. This establishes the framework for years to come. And it's probably the biggest piece of legislation that you'll work on as an alder is the budget. And so when you vote on this, you take ownership of it if you support the budget and however it comes out. So they can come out as the amendments. We can vote on them individually, or it could be a scenario.
I personally would prefer just to go right down the list of amendments, just because I think that'll be easier. And I did have 2 that I was offering that I'm withdrawing.
If there is a package, someone can always request to separate the issues, which it sounds like you would do. So.
Yeah, I would request to separate them all and vote on them all separately.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
I believe you could call the vote too, right now. I mean, there are amendments offered, but you could call the vote to see if we have support for the budget as presented.
We could, but it's only appropriate that there's debate on the motion. And I know that we've discussed it a lot, but I think it's only appropriate that there is debate. Ms. Reiki?
I also just wanted to point out that there are budget reductions in these scenarios, and so I would still like to be able to consider those. And the net effect of open enrollment adjustment that would need to be included in the budget, which wasn't originally, and also the senior center issue. So I just wonder how those will be included if we just go ahead and approve the original budget proposal.
Mr. McGilvray?
The reductions that you're speaking of, I think Mr. Manley's original amendment was to reduce it to 2.5%, which they did find a way to make that happen. But Mr. Manley, please jump in. I think his intent was that the reductions were to get the tax rate down, not to find a way to backfill it. So I don't know if Mr. Manley's, if you'd care to address that before we get too far down that road.
Mr. Manley?
Yeah, I guess the intent of my amendment was to cut spending sufficiently enough to get us to 2.5%, which in relation to the recommended budget was approximately, I guess, using my back of the envelope math, about a $40,000 or $41,000 amendment. You know, I guess at this point I don't want to make any presuppositions about what amendments are going to pass or not, so I just kind of, you know, if we're going to work our way through amendments, we can work our way through amendments and take them up individually.
One more.
Mr. Diaz?
Sorry, that's not how the amendment was worded, I don't think. I think it was just to take 41,000, and if we ended up at a higher percentage, I was actually pretty impressed with the work that staff did to find stuff to remove. So like, no matter what the percentage is, I think we should pass that amendment just because it's a good thing and it cuts some unnecessary spending.
Mr. Manley?
I am glad to hear what sounds like support for that amendment. And I'm also impressed with the work that city staff did in order to, you know, to find savings in our budget. But what I think is unfortunate if it got lost is that the purpose of my amendment and to ask staff to go back and find ways to reduce spending wasn't so that other alders could raise spending. The purpose of the amendment was to lessen the property tax burden on the taxpayers of the city. So if other alders have spending amendments, and you want to have them be, you know, neutral to the mill rate, then please come up with ways to cut spending to pay for your amendments. But, you know, my point is, when I voted for the 3% increase in the Finance Committee, I said at that time, I'm not comfortable with 3%. I said that will forward along for consideration and move it forward at this part of the process. But I felt, and again was very clear at that time, that I thought 3% was too high, and I'm more comfortable with 2.5%, and that's where I want to end up tonight. So I guess from my standpoint, any of my colleagues that wish to increase spending beyond the recommended budget, as far as I'm concerned, for my amendment, the value of that spending needs to be added to my amendment so that we end up at the end of the night at 2.5%.
Thank you. Mr. Yurs.
I guess I would just, if we're going to be debating amendments, and I've already heard from at least 2 alders, if we could just go down the list of amendments, I would appreciate that. Also for the fact that I unfortunately was not able to attend last week's meeting due to a family emergency. There are some comments that I would like to say, however, I don't want to say them now. If we're going to discuss the amendments later anyway, I don't want to take up unnecessary time.
Thank you. It appears that there is a desire to go amendment by amendment, so we will go down that direction. Before we do, just a couple comments. I think we need to keep in mind, first of all, I've worked with the city staff on the budget that came out of the Finance Committee, and I can support a 3% increase in the levy. We've had, looking back here, starting back in 2008, we had a 0% increase. 2009, we had a 3% increase. This is the mill rate increase. So 0% in 08, 3% in 09. We did 3.7% in 2010, and we made a conscious decision at that point that we were going to add additional staff for police and fire. And that was the reason we had higher that year. The next year we were at 1.5%. In 2012 we were at 2%. I think anything above a 3% is not justified. Working on budgets is about establishing priorities, and people's priorities may not be the same. And I don't have a problem with that. You know, we need to talk about what priorities are, and in the end we take a vote. And it's like I said before, this is building the framework of where we move in the future. I think, and what I've heard from people is that they are very appreciative of what we have done in the past regarding the city budgets. I've been here since 1997. We've never had a crowd like this before. We've never had a crowd. In most years we had no one show up for the public hearing, and it's because the taxpayers of this city and business owners, maybe not residents of the city, but business owners in the city, trusted that we were going to be responsible with our budgeting. And they liked where we were heading, they liked where we established our priorities, and that we stuck to those priorities. So one of the things that I do want to caution the council on this evening, and we know that we just went through an annual reevaluation of the entire city. So when we look at the bottom of the summary that Bill and Cindy put together, and we talk about what a 1% would be on the average home, or a 1.1%, not everybody is the same when it comes to revals. So some people are going to see a lot higher increase than others because of how the value of their house changed, and that has to do with the market and what things were based on January 1 of this year when the assessment, when it was done. So I've tried to explain to a lot of people when they think because their assessment went down that their property taxes are going to go down, and that's not the case. The property taxes are going to go up, and if we had a 0% increase, we would see residents in this city that would see tax increases because of how things were the reassessment, the revalue. So if, you know, if it's the single-family homes for the most part is where the major reduction is, somebody else is making up that difference. The total tax bill still needs to be paid. And that's what we have to keep in mind. And it'll be interesting to see when we're all done with this. I don't know, I haven't analyzed this. I'm wondering if it's not a lot of the older homes that are gonna see higher increases than some of the newer homes in this city. And in a lot of cases, those are the very people that are on fixed incomes. They're the very people that are on fixed incomes. So I think we need to keep this in mind. And you know, I'm sure I'm gonna have opportunities as we go through the amendments. I just cannot support where we create a hole in any future budgets. That is just inappropriate budgeting. It's irresponsible. It's what has gotten the state in trouble in the past. It's what has gotten our federal government in trouble. And I just can't support that. So again, I'm sure that I'll have more things that I'll be saying throughout the evening, but it appears that we want to deal with amendment by amendment. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Burns if you would just start from the top with the amendments. And a roll call vote has been requested, so on any amendments, we will take a roll call vote. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, so just a point of parliamentary procedure. We have a motion which is on the floor right now. I think the process would be for somebody who was interested in making the amendment, make a motion to amend the motion to include the effect of the amendment. That would require a second, and then there could be discussion and then a roll call vote, and then we would move on to the next item with an additional motion. We would ask that when somebody makes a motion, staff will just kind of restate the motion so we're sure that we're clear on what the impact would be and make sure that we have a chance to keep a good total of the effects as we go through. And then once we're done with the motions on the amendments, I think we'll ask for a short break and just calculate the total, see where we're at, and we can report that information to the body. So I'll be working off the list of amendments that we had for the Committee of the Whole meeting. So item number 1 would be a motion, or excuse me, the description of the amendment was to add $4,224 to the Public Works budget for bicycle lane striping.
And I would ask that that amendment be withdrawn.
Mr. Diaz?
I also made that amendment, and I am also withdrawing support. And I just want to explain it quick. I've heard from some constituents who are bicycle riders, or a constituent who's a bicycle rider, and talked to some other people who ride. And they rated the priority for that as bike riders for restriping as a lower priority. I would like to point out that some of the main roads do have bicycle striping. And I think it is important that we are as bicycle friendly as we can be. We have a lot of people use it for recreation, cuts down on car driving, which, you know, if you look at a business that has to pay for parking spots and something like underground parking spot, every spot you reduce that needs a car, you save money. And, you know, we have businesses that are building based on the bike path. So I do think bike riding is really important. And so that's not why I'm withdrawing support for the amendment. It's just because I don't think it's a higher priority, because I think the main streets are striped and I haven't heard problems on other streets. So thank you.
Thank you. There's, it's not necessary then to have a motion to withdraw it. If the author of the motion wishes to withdraw, then we'll just withdraw.
Right, I just wanted to clarify, so.
Sir. Mr. Baer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to explain why I want to withdraw as well. I think that adding opportunities for bicycle recreation is something that adds to public safety, but without a few more details on where these stripes would go, and I think what we should do is have a larger conversation on this very topic. I think Verona has a good opportunity to expand this attraction in the community, and it is an attraction. We have a lot of very nice bicycle trails, and you know, we're lucky to have the Military Ridge Trail and the Ice Age Trail going through our community, intersecting in our community. And I think that we've had some good initial conversations, Ms. Doyle and I, along with Mr. Burns and the city planner and Mr. Reeder, about what a sort of comprehensive system for bicycling, recreation, and public safety could be in the city. So I think we could, I'd like to withdraw this amendment to include, but to have this conversation in another way. I think we need to have more details and work from there.
Thank you. I would also ask, since Ms. Ricky, you also had an amendment, I want to ask you if this is satisfactory to you.
Yes, that's fine. Actually, it sounds like I'm piggybacking off of these two people who also made the same amendment, but I did give some thought to this before tonight, and I hadn't heard anything in particular from anybody during this process, this amendment process, and so I thought it would be better to hold off on this and give it some more thought and have more public input as to where the striping would go in the future. And so I'm happy to withdraw it as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burns, you ready on the second one?
Yes, amendment number 2 was to move $70,000 for the Cathedral Point Park Phase 1 development from 2015 to 2014 and reduce the Westridge Park development from $25,000 to $5,000. These funds are all within the park fund. The impact would be a $50,000 increase in the park fund expenditures for 2014. There's no impact on the levy.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would make a motion to amend the motion to include this amendment.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Reekie. We are having discussion now on the amendment. Ms. Reekie?
As a member of the Parks and Rec Committee, I would just like to say that this was run by the committee and Dave Walker, and he was in favor of it, and it seemed like everyone was in consensus. And maybe, Mr. Steiner, you could add to this comment too, if you want to, if you have the same interpretation as me or not, as far as how the Parks and Rec Committee viewed this potential amendment, and being in favor of it to support the funding for the Cathedral Point Park.
Mr. Steiner, you can respond if you want to. You're not required to.
I don't need to repeat what's said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steiner. Further questions or comments on this motion to amend?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll note that I've certainly heard from some of the residents of Cathedral Point that they've been waiting for their park for, several years, and there are many homes that have recently been built in Cathedral Park, and it's expanding. And this is, as Mr. Burns said, all from park funds and has no impact on the tax levy. So I'd certainly ask that my colleagues support this amendment, and I'll also note that this was an idea originally floated by Mr. McGilvery at the committee level, and I'm very pleased that the city staff was able to find a way to make this happen. So thank you to them.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, Mr. McGilvery?
My point would be, again, this is a placeholder, so people understand this. The park board has the jurisdiction to decide how they will spend their park fund money. And the conversation was such that it was obvious at the point that we were at in the finance committee that Westridge was not in a position where they were ready to do anything particular with the park. So what was spoke about at the finance committee meeting was exactly what Ms. Reekie was mentioning, that there's a potential for expansion of that park. Now, I know Mr. Manley has some thoughts on people who've been waiting for parks, and I certainly agree. But again, what I would say is it's the jurisdiction of the park board to decide how those funds are allocated.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to be supporting this amendment. I talked about this at the committee of the whole meeting last week, but the part of the city that Mr. Yers and I represent, there are a lot of homeowners and they are taxpayers. Yes, this is not a levy issue, but it's a park fund issue, and that the park fund involves park impact fees that homeowners who build a house pay into the fund. And in Kettle Creek and in Kettle Woods and in Gateway Estates, we have been paying into the park fund and have waited, some of us who have been around since 2001 have been waiting for 12 years to have a park built using the funds that we contributed. So with all due respect to my fellow alders, I don't feel sorry for people who have had to wait a couple years for a relatively brand new subdivision, and I think it's a bad precedent to set where we're going to have aldermen making decisions in the state budget about who's going to get their park first, and exert political influence over that process. So I can't support this amendment.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the amendment? Ms. Reekie?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that something that was discussed that I don't know a whole lot about, but at the Parks and Rec Committee level was the accessibility of getting to the designated parkland and whether or not there are already roads built. So that was one thing that we talked about a little bit, and that it was accessible in Cathedral Point.
Mr. Yurs?
I actually have a question, and Mr. McGilvery, you can probably excuse me, answer this for me. You mentioned that the Parks Board still has authority to, what's the right one to use? Fund what they desire. And how would that work in relation to this amendment?
Well, to me, this is a bit of a shell game. That's the point I'm making. I mean, you're moving funds around in your budget, but ultimately the way this works is the recommendation would come out of the Parks Board. And if the Parks Board decides to use all of its money on a particular project, to Mr. Manley's point, and the people over there in Kettle Creek don't get a park, we would have to vote on that, but that is up to the Park Board. Now, the Park Board's made up of people who volunteer and are appointed by the mayor, and there are 2 aldermen who sit on that. So in some sense, aldermen do get to control it, but in the past, I was on the Park Board for 9 years before Ms. Reiki took my place, and I didn't ever feel that it was a political body. I mean, they just did what they thought was best for the community. So that's my point. I mean, I understand the intent here, and this is a little bit of a political football. That's what it looks like to me. I'm just trying to point out that ultimately the Park Board makes the recommendation of how that money would be spent. And David's not here tonight, but I think, Cindy, is that fund right now at about $300,000? Does that sound right? So what we're saying is we're allocating $70,000 for a specific use in the future. I think the intent by some of the alders would be that it would be sooner rather than later. Ultimately, that's a conversation we'll have in the future. So I hope that answers your question.
Ms. Doyle?
Well, if I remember correctly from that Finance Committee meeting, what kind of came about or how this idea came about was there was no mention of any parks kind of in District 2. It was just that these 2 particular parks were discussed in the timeline that was proposed by the Parks Department. So there wasn't anything even allocated for the area that you're speaking of, Alder Manley. So the idea was, instead of spending all the money in 2014 for Westridge, because there wasn't a consensus of how that parkland would be used, move the funds from 2015 for Cathedral Point up to 2014 to reach a consensus. It wasn't that there was any knock on any other area, just that wasn't even, it didn't even appear in the capital budget that was proposed by the Parks Department.
Mr. McGilvray?
I would have one thing more to add because I do represent part of Westridge. That particular piece of property, I think the Epic piece is what we were talking about at the time, and that was not ever a city park. That was a piece of property that was given to the city that was going to be used as a park. So there was a meeting that the Westridge residents were at, and they expressed some concern about a proposal that was out there. And it was pretty obvious for me, and I think Mr. Yurs was there, that there wasn't really a particular idea of what that park needed to be. They knew what they didn't want it to be. And we felt that in the discussion, that in 2014 it was likely that would be the time to develop what the park might become. But I think if David was here, what he would tell you is that park is not anything that was ever planned for, and monies were never taken in for building a park there. It's a gift, if you would have it, from Epic. So we'll have to find a way to absorb that into our budget into the future. So I hope that kind of answers everybody's question.
Additional questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, a roll call vote has been requested. Ms. Schofield, if you'd read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
Aye.
Alderperson Doyle?
Aye.
Alderperson Manley?
No.
Alderperson McGilvery?
No.
Alderperson Reiki?
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner?
No.
And Alderperson Yurs?
Aye.
And that motion passes, that amendment to the main motion. Mr. Burns?
Amendment number 3 was to remove a recommendation to carry over $15,000 of funds budgeted in 2013 for a fire EMS consolidation study. And the impact of that would then be increasing our balances at the end of 2013, and to apply that $15,000 from balances, with $5,000 of that going to professional services for human resources related consulting and administration, and $10,000 of that to increasing the city's personnel contingency. There is no levy impact.
Mr. Bear?
I will move to amend the motion to include this amendment.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Doyle. Mr. Yurs?
I would like to express my support for this amendment. You know, as kind of going over this and doing some reading, when we discussed the fire and EMS consolidation with Fitchburg, I think the consensus of that committee of the whole meeting was that that's not a discussion for right now. And that if that does happen, that's something years down the road. And I do think the HR consulting is something that the city is in need of. And so therefore I will be supporting this amendment.
Mr. Diaz?
Hi. I will not be supporting this amendment. I still think that the money needs to be removed because I don't think it's the right time to do a study. But I guess I'm in favor of my own amendment, which just removes it and doesn't add anything else. I do think that HR consulting and the contingency fund stuff is really important. I don't think there's any waste in the budget. It's just a question of priorities. So I'd rather just see it removed and just nothing added in its place.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll note that, and again, I want to thank Mr. Burns for working with me on this amendment. The intent is to remove that line item, and I think Mr. Yurs characterized it very well, that it's just not a good time for this study. And I think Mr. Diaz made a good point at the committee of the whole meeting that these studies do have a shelf life, and if we're not at this time close to that point where a consolidation would be considered, I don't think that holding on to the people's money in this way is necessarily appropriate. So using that money for related items, I think, is appropriate. In this case, they are one-time costs, one for an HR consultant to sort of review city wages and do a comparables analysis and what sort of adjustments we may need to do to keep our city staff paid at a comparable rate. And then the second usage of $10,000 for the personnel contingency is targeted mainly at ensuring that we have enough insurance, essentially, for what could happen with negotiations with the unions.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Manley?
Just to follow up on a point that Mr. Bear just made, he said that $10,000 going into the personnel contingency fund will help with whatever happens with the unions. And I just wonder if staff knows how much the city has incurred in terms of legal expenses as a result of some of the disagreements that have been had with respect to the union so far this year, and in particular the fire department and some of the threats of litigation and so forth.
Mr. Burns?
I don't have a total figure in front of me. That's certainly something that we could research and provide the exact number, but on various fire department related issues, we've spent into the thousands this year.
And if I could just follow up, maybe we better make sure we've got enough money to pay our legal bills before we start spending money that we don't even have in this area.
Other questions or comments? Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. Could you clarify for me the $10,000? Mr. Bear indicated it's a one-time expense.
Mr. Burns?
It's difficult to say for certain what that would be at this point. If the intent is the money would go into a personnel contingency, that could be used to cover either one-time or ongoing expenses, depending on what the terms of a settlement would be. I would say if it were to be used for things with an ongoing impact, such as a cost of living adjustment or a benefit increase. That could be something that would have an impact on future budgets, but at this point, we don't know specifically what that would be spent on out of contingency.
Mr. Diaz?
I just wanted to point out, I think that the money for the legal fees was, it was thousands of dollars, but I think it's money well spent, because we could potentially prevent the city from being exposed to even bigger liability. And I think there is currently the threat of litigation based over the fire department thing. And some of these things, I mean, maybe it was just nobody could have foreseen them, but some of the stuff with the agreement with the town just hadn't been worked through. And I hope we don't work it through the court system, but that's kind of where we're at now. And I think the legal money was money well spent.
Just my issue on this amendment is, first of all, on the study. We can hold off on the study, and if the council were to determine that we really needed to move forward, I think the conversation should continue, and that can be done in parallel with what we're doing with fire and EMS in this city. So I don't have a problem removing that $15,000. I really don't even have a problem with the $5,000 for the HR consulting. But the $10,000 for a personnel contingency, I can tell you that in my 30-plus years of experience in local government, if that money is there, more than likely it's going to be spent, and it's going to be an ongoing expense. So then it is more than a one-time expenditure, and we shouldn't be using one-time dollars for ongoing expenses. So I would suggest that if you're interested in putting $10,000 in contingency, personnel contingency, then you ought to be honest to the taxpayers and tax them for it. Either you tax them for it or you don't spend it, one or the other. That's where I stand on this one. Other comments, questions?
I would, along the same lines, Mr. Mayor, I would just say that it seems kind of vague what the $10,000 would be used for. I mean, it's pretty specific right now. It's $15,000 for the fire and EMS consolidation study. If you feel like we need to take that off the table, that's fine. I would agree with the $5,000 simply because I know Bill and Cindy. I asked very pointedly at the Finance Committee meeting whether or not they were comfortable waiting an additional year for this HR consulting. They said they could do it. I would just assume we wait if they say they can do it. You're using, though, the $10,000 and not, again, you're not really being honest about it because you don't know. And I would much rather have, if you're going to take $10,000 from something, put it onto something directly. Mr. Diaz wanted to take the $9,800 out of, or $4,000 out of the surveillance cameras. That's a one-time expense. If you wanted to fill one thing from there to there, it's no different to the budget. That's fine. That's a one-time expense. I just can't handle the idea that you're passing the buck forward.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm perfectly sensitive to that argument, and I think that the intent here is to cover what could possibly happen with those negotiations, and I think that is what a personnel contingency is all about. It's not about passing the buck to a future amendment, to a future budget. It's about covering ourselves in this budget in the event that we do have more costs than we think. So I think it is actually slightly a more honest way to do it, but
I would disagree on that. We may not ever agree on it, but I think if you want to spend the $10,000, then you ought to be honest to the taxpayers and say, we're going to tax you for it.
Well, sure, and I get that, but I don't know that we know that $10,000 will have to be spent. This is about making sure that if we need to spend it, it's there.
And if the money is in the budget, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be spent either. It's no different. So, Mr. Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the difference here is that we've got a certain amount that was approved in the recommended budget for a personnel contingency, and that was built into the base levy, knowing that that amount of money, should it go for additional compensation for city employees, is built into the base and would be spent on an annual basis. Taking one-time money from a study that you decide not to move forward with and putting it in, stacking that on top of the base personnel contingency is basically saying we're going to pay wages this year with one-time money, but who knows where we're going to find the money to pay those wages in 2015 or 2016, and that gets into this problem of of building holes into the budget, which really exposes property taxpayers to additional tax liability in the future. And so I guess I'm with Alderman Diaz on this one. I'm not going to support it. And I think that the best way to ensure that this additional money is not spent in a way that would create a hole in a future budget is just to not spend it at all.
Other questions, comments on this amendment? Mr. Bear?
You know, and I'll just note that the real, you know, sort of the workings behind this is that because we're creating a fire department, we've had a legal opinion that there will be new firefighters, and because they are new employees, state law requires that they pay the full employee share of the Wisconsin retirement system. And I think that could result in a situation where we don't have money to offset that wage cut to those firefighters, and they could be paying that entirely out of pocket. So if we don't have enough in personnel contingency, is it possible for us to come back later and amend the amount in the budget for their compensation?
We can always come back and amend the budget. It would take a 2/3 vote, but we can do that. Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you know, at the risk of sounding callous here, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but preface it by saying we've got just a tremendous city staff in Verona. I think we're fortunate for every employee that we have. They do great work from department to department. We've got great department heads. And while I appreciate Mr. Bear's efforts to say, geez, let's try and hold those employees harmless from any increase in their health insurance, for those, what's that? Retirement. Sorry. For those of us who work in the private sector, increased healthcare costs and increased retirement costs are just a part of having a job. And while it's not fun for anybody to have to pay more for their health insurance or for their pensions, and I think it's worth noting that many public employee pensions are far more generous than pensions in the private sector in terms of the value of their benefits. I think taxpayers have a hard time following the argument that they should pay to hold public employees harmless from any kind of an increase. So I think that's important for all of us to keep in mind.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the motion? If not, Ms. Schofield, if you'd read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear?
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz?
No.
Alderperson Doyle?
No.
Alderperson Manley?
No.
Alderperson McGilvery?
No.
Alderperson Rieke?
No.
Alderperson Steiner?
No.
And Alderperson Yurs?
Aye. That motion to amend fails on a 6-2 vote. Next amendment?
Yes, the next amendment was to add $50,350 to the library budget to fund 2 library assistant positions for a total of 1.0 full-time equivalent positions. This would have a levy impact of $50,350.
Mr. Bear?
We'll move to amend the motion to include the amendment.
We have a motion by Mr. Bear. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by,
You can take it.
seconded by Mr. Diaz. Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This amendment would add $50,350 to the library budget for the library board to, at their discretion, add 2 library assistant positions for a 1.0 full-time equivalent. And it's entirely possible that this could fund additional positions based on what the choices by those employees are for benefits. I think that funding the library is something that obviously the city has committed those funds in the past, and I appreciate Mr. McGilvery's comments at the outset of this debate on this agenda item about that commitment, and I think that that commitment has produced very good results for the city. We have the best library in the state, right here in Verona. And that investment has paid off, and that doesn't mean that we should cut off that investment. We need to continue that investment. And my best understanding is that there's a demand problem at the library, that many people, 233,000 people walked through the library last year. And it's only responsible, I think, for us to respond to that demand in a responsible way. And this amendment is not about Sunday hours. If it was, it would be significantly more money. This is about maintaining the level of services, that award-winning level of services that we have at our library. The library is a gem, and I have to commend Mr.